My name is Barbara. Thank you for your time for waiting. I'm not going to go. Alright, let's start over. My name is Barbara, and today I'm going to present my research that deals with the question of estimating the likelihood of people going to college. Tertiary education. I wasn't familiar with the topic, as you can hear my accent. Tertiary education. What you're looking at here, maybe we'll pull up, but it is a 51-meter ship at the steamer, and it was built in 1837 with a specific purpose of navigating through the icy waters, through the ice. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is an icebreaker. I'm an economist up here. Sorry. Alright. Alright, so, back to... this is going to be fun. What is tertiary education? Tertiary education is any post-secondary education, so anything beyond high school, or let's say if you're from parents. And why is it important? Well, because it's important because it is linked to, it is perceived to affect crime rates, and bachelor's research shows that higher levels of education are associated with lower crime rates, better health overall in the country, higher income levels, and since nations are consistent of individuals, it also helps to boost the economic development of a nation. My research is aimed at estimating the factors, looking at the factors that may be influential to the participation in higher education. And I used the data that I obtained from the World Bank. It's national level data, so for many countries. And I used the ordinary least squares model, regression model. And I include, as my explanatory or dependent variables, I use some of the economic and growth-related factors. And we'll see that in a little bit. Okay, so as any researcher would know, you must look into previous work done in the area of your interest. So we'll just look at some of the articles that I found that relate to my topic. First, Quick and White. In 2004, they conducted a research, and they wanted to examine how the family and familial ties and expectations of the families affect participation in post-secondary education among students in the U.S. native students and the immigrants. They did control for ethnic backgrounds, so they just wanted to look into specific factors. And they found that the family structure and the expectations from the families to these children has a major impact on whether or not they choose to go to school or whether or not they go to school. The next one is Henry and Heckman in 2002. They wanted to look at the influence of the short-term credit restraints versus the long-term effects, long-term factors that may hinder the abilities of children. And they actually found an interesting thing. They said that students overall, at some point in time during their collegial career, they do struggle with finances. But what matters most is something that hinders them early on, and those factors that may affect their abilities will determine or will have more power on influencing whether or not they choose to go to college. Because if children don't do so well in elementary school, they're not going to do so well in middle school, not going to do so well in high school. If they graduate, it's, you never know if they'll choose to go to college. Some of the studies that I found, they wanted to look at the link between the crime rates and education. And in this study, in 2004, in North Carolina University, they wanted to analyze the link between the graduation from high school versus committing crime. And they found that actually in states that enforce mandatory participation and going to school on a mandatory basis, those laws reduce the incarceration rates. So if children stay in school, they're less likely to commit a crime. And that was the same result for all the groups of children, regardless of their race background. And especially significant, this was especially significant for the violent crimes. Okay. Upon looking at some of the work that was previously done, I decided to come up with a list of variables that I expect would influence children going to school, people going to school. And so I used the World Bank Factbook data. It is an amazing database. It's very flexible. You can pick the variables that you like and you think will work. It's a national level data. And I started off with 170 observations for the years of 2003, 2012. But it's true that some countries may not necessarily report their data consistently. So I had to drop a lot of observations. Some of the observations were dropping. I ended up using 140 of them only in my regression, which is still decent. And so some of the variables, I looked at what I thought would be influential is measurements of poverty. For example, the depth of food deficit is per kilocalories per person a day. And say expenditure on primary, secondary, tertiary education. And some of the ones that we're more used to, like unemployment, long-term unemployment, inflation. All right, results. Now, I remember sitting right there last year, and I was watching other people present, and I hadn't taken any other analytics courses at the time, and my classmates were presenting, and they would say, oh, well, adjusted R squared, this, and this means this is very significant, and this and that. And I'm like, what? I didn't know what was going on. So for those people who are not familiar with the statistics or analysis, econometrics, let's just explain this real quickly, what I'm going to hit on. Okay, so when you look at this shows p-value, shows the significance level. You see this? Very significant. These are my independent variable. What I'm looking into is the tertiary participation as a percentage of the population. All of these are the right-hand side variables, so I'm looking at how they explain their participation. Does everybody okay with that so far? All right, so this sign right here, for each variable, if it's a positive sign, there's nothing here, that means the correlation is positive, so they move in the same direction. One goes up, the other one goes up as well. If you see a negative sign, that means that they move in different directions. So if one goes up by 1 unit, the other one goes down by however many units you see there. So, are we good? All right, so let's look at some of the results. Some of the signs that I saw were not at all what I expected. For example, let's look at the unemployment with tertiary participation, tertiary education, which means that those are people who have some kind of college degree. And that has just here as a positive sign. It is strongly, it's significant. And so what does that mean? That means that they move in the same direction. The unemployment with education goes up, and enrollment in education goes up as well. That doesn't make sense, does it? Now, it kind of threw me off at first, but then I started thinking. My data is 2003 to 2012. What was in the middle? Yes. And so part of that could be explained by that factor. Major recession, loss of jobs. And so people who had, say, 2-year degrees previously could easily get a job, but now they thought, well, I can't get a job with my 2-year degree anymore, so maybe if I get a 4-year degree, I could get a job. And the same for each level of education. So I think that could be part of it. Then another one is the expenditure per student tertiary. It has a negative correlation, which means that if, say, policymakers invest more in education, college education, the enrollment goes down. That doesn't make sense either. But if we step back and think about, twist the question a little bit, not question, but the thinking. maybe because the enrollment is so low, the government is trying to invest more. So that could explain the negative sign there. But then some of the signs were definitely as I expected. For example, the expenditure on primary and secondary education. So if you invest in children when they're in elementary and middle school, they're more likely to carry on with that education. Okay, funny word, heteroscedasticity. It means the variation from the mean. It's not ideal, and I see that, and I'm going to address that in further future research. And that basically means that my error term goes up. But if you look at this is the scatter plot, not scatter plot, oh gosh, histogram, English, histogram of the error terms. It's normal, it's good. So, conclusions, there are several potential points for their further research. Governments, what I wanted to do is research something that could be useful for people in general. And there are some things that governments cannot control. For example, whether or not children talk to their parents about school, which is significant, as established in the previous research. Policymakers cannot do anything about that, but there are some variables. For example, the investment in primary education. You could invest in children when they're small, and it's going to carry on and produce higher output, and children will choose to go to college later on. And also, with using my data, I would like to, in the future, conduct a panel data estimation, which is complicated. I'm not going to get into that.